Hello everyone, welcome back to the SMITE Comprehensive Guide to Odin. Really quick, I've been away for a couple of days. That has not been by my choice. That is due to highly questionable internet. My internet has been really weak the past couple of days, to the point where I've lost it sometimes, and other times it's not been strong enough to maintain a connection to SMITE. So that's why I haven't recorded anything. I haven't been able to connect to a match long enough. This is just the first match that I got. That was a really great demonstration of a lot of things in solo lane beyond just Odin. I was originally looking for a great Odin demonstration, and this also has that, but there's a lot to talk about in this particular episode, so I wanted to point that out. Second off, we have a really unusual team composition where technically Freya is support, but she neither builds nor plays like it. She actually plays more like a second ADC. So throughout the match, I will be referencing that because that does change up the way I approach building a little bit here in the mid to late game. Alright, secondarily, we've got the really interesting problem of two warriors. Now in the solo lane, one of these two is going to wind up being the support. One of these two is going to wind up being the solo lane. I actually anticipated that Surtur was going to be the support and that Mulan would be the solo lane. That was my assumption initially. It doesn't make a huge difference because they're both physical, but for Odin, Mulan is a little bit more difficult to deal with in the first 5 levels. I mean, Surtur is no walk in the park, and I'll talk about that in the first few levels of this match. The things you have to adjust with Odin, with anyone who has early game sustain, but we'll talk about that when we get to it. So, you're going to be having an issue here, huh? There we go. And we'll just skip on ahead here, where Merlin and I go on ahead and wipe these out, right? This doesn't go great. You'll see my health. Oh, we skipped back too much. You'll see where I did not do particularly well, where Merlin and I cleared so slowly that I took a lot of damage. I actually used my multi-potion, and of course, we want to jump in here. Now, I'm using an ability-based build. I already knew that ahead of time. Zonkui is a little tankier than average mages, so I wanted to use the Bluestone Brooch, right? I'm fortunately enough able to clear the wave well enough. I use my shield to absorb some damage there, and then I do some poking on him because my wave is coming up here, so I hit him pretty hard with the poke. Alright, and this is also, you can see these little rocks, those heal him. I don't want to approach quite yet because I don't have my jump, so I'm being pretty cautious about this. Now I have access to my jump pretty soon. I want to clear the archers. Boom, use my shield to hit those. Now I didn't use my jump there because I wanted to be able to jump away from Surtur. He was inevitably going to come after me. He has a little bit of a better wave clear at level 2, and of course he beat me to level 3 by dint of having better level 2 wave clear, because he has the fire aura, right? So he's a little bit faster at clearing the waves. I'm taking a lot of damage here, and I'm backing out here because I don't particularly feel like dying to him early on. Now this is the really big problem with any laning opponent that has sustain in their first few levels. Surtur hasn't been really consistent with this, but he can pick up those rocks for some healing, as I mentioned before, and just picking up a couple of them is going to give him better sustain than Odin, who has 0. Alright, now he makes a mistake here. He lets me clear this wave, which gives me a minion advantage in this fight, which is not something he should have let me do since I'm now at level 3. Putting me roughly on par with him at this particular point. I also have fresh potions, something he does not have, right? So I clear his wave, and he's taking all this minion poke. He relied too heavily on his imp there to help him out, and he didn't have potions at that point. He really should not. I mean, the totem was a great decision, but he went for the scorpion as well, which was his mistake, because he didn't have the potions to compete with me at that point. I just come back from tower, so I was fresh, he was not. A combination of those two factors is why he died there, right? And then he comes out here. Now, I ult him, which he should have anticipated right away. He doesn't have ult to get out, so I was able to get some bonus damage in there. I back off because I ran out of mana, which is also why I used the multi-potion. You can see, though, despite the fact that I ran out of mana, with my ult I was still able to do half of his health. Clear the wave there. Or at least help clear the wave. Now, I intentionally step into his fire to get my minions to attack him, right? And we're just keeping on with that. I used my relic to reduce his protections, He very effectively gets me out of the spear throw, Gungnir's Smite. He activates his relic, which I dodge away from. He ults. Now, this is another mistake because I have a shield. Odin has a shield. A lot of people forget that Odin has a shield, and because of that shield, I am able to survive his ult and his damage. Well, I survived the ult without the shield, barely, but it's the follow-up that he was counting on. But the follow-up is what I had the shield up in time for. Alright, and this is why multi-potions are so important. This is why I built no level 1 items after my starter item, and I went with the Chalice and the multi-potions. This is one of the reasons why. It gives you some really great sustain, and if the opponent isn't ready for it, and this is especially important for Odin, who, again, does not have his own sustain, so you have to use potions. By the way, I backed up there so that I could hit the, at least some of the front line here with my Raven Shield. But anyways, back to the point. You have to rely on potions for Odin to sustain. There's just really no choice there, so it's very important you have these. You can hear Lancelot getting the blue buff. I'm just grabbing this, which allows us to both not have to split the experience, which isn't ideal, but it keeps, you know, us relatively even. I grab my blue buff, I go back, because of course I have my teleport fully charged, and I am looking to get some anti-healing. Now, the reason why I'm getting anti-healing is you could see me check really quick there. I wanted to see what his first item was going to be, and it's Soul Reaver, right? Or Soul Eater, excuse me. It's Soul Eater, which means he's going to be looking to do a lot of sustain. And, of course, with his ult, there's no guarantee my ult is going to keep him here. In fact, I believe he uses it here. That's not later. No, he just breaks out regularly. But he takes a lot of damage doing that, right? Naturally. I dodge, quite by accident, his thrown rock. And I'm looking to get back some more poke here. Now, I'm looking to attack him pretty aggressively because I'm going to level up on him, right? Use my Raven Shout for some shielding. Clear that. Right, he's going to go for the totem, which he should not be, considering he's not in great health right here. I activate my relic, I reduce his protections, and knowing he's looking for that totem, I jump onto him, right? And he, of course, he is really low, so I throw my spear. I use the homing version, just because I wasn't going to be able to have time to charge up to the stun. He should have backed here. I'm assuming he didn't, because he doesn't have his teleport up, and he's going to try to tackle the minions under tower, is my assumption here. You can see my healing chalice tick away and heal me. He did not build the chalice, by the way, so he does not have any of those options. I start working on the bastion because I know that if I work on the bastion, that kind of keeps him down, right? I'm not too worried about getting ganked at this particular point because, in all honesty, I actually falsely assume that Ao Kuang is near mid lane with Zhong Kui. I don't actually know where he is, but that's my assumption, and that's, you know, I kill him there because he was relying on his ult, but of course, in the long run, that didn't work, obviously. One thing you'll notice about Surtur throughout this match, and this is really my only criticism of the Surtur in this match, is he's too greedy. He overstays a lot of the time throughout this match. I'll point this out occasionally because it is important, because I also overstay several times in this match. Mostly because of this early lead that I'm getting. I get a little overconfident and I stay too long in fights that I have no business staying in. I recover my mentality late in the game, but I'll talk about this as we go on, because this is very common for solo players. This is a common strategic mistake of a lot of solo players, including myself, when I play in the solo lane. So I will be talking about this throughout the match, which is one of the reasons why I like this match for demonstration purposes. So I'm just, you know, clearing up here. I'm assuming you can see he just got his teleport there. Now, the reason why I stuck around despite my low health was because I did assume that he did not have his teleport. That was why he stayed up in the first place, right? Go in here, grab my blue buff, whiff it, grab it this time. He uses his ult, but this is going to be really great because he's going to be trying to land on me. I just use my ult, I use my shield, I use this for some sustain, right? He dodges my spear because I have 0 accuracy, and we do kill him. Alright, again, he was way too aggressive, he stayed way too up. Once Lancelot came in, he should have backed out immediately, but he fought Lancelot a little bit. I get given a heart attack by Ao Kuang. And, you know, credit to Merlin, he did warn me, but it was... I'm assuming that Ao Kuang had left that lane invisibly. But the Lancelot avenges me, which is fantastic, right? I have my Contagion, which will help with the anti-heal. Now, I also want anti-heal for another reason. Now, I mentioned in the previous episode, actually in the past couple of episodes, that Odin really doesn't often need anti-healing. In this particular case, literally everyone on the enemy team heals themselves. And if they get Phantom Shell, which one of them does get Phantom Shell later on, I'll talk about that later on, but if they get Phantom Shell, then my Ring of Spears is not going to function at all for anti-healing, so I will need something else. So I want anti-healing. In this early in the game, Contagion is going to help me against Surtur, not only in terms of physical protections, obviously, but also because, again, he can just ult out of my ults. He never does, except, well, he does once or twice in the match, but early on in the match, he does not, which you've seen. Right, I see Ao Kuang there, so I jump away, because I don't particularly feel like messing with that. I have no magic protections, so I want to treat Ao Kuang with a lot of respect here, basically, because I don't have any way of dealing with Ao Kuang. I'm still, you can see where I'm trying to figure out if Ao Kuang is still over here. I see Zhong Kui right there. I assume that Ao Kuang is probably going to be over there. There he is. I actually assume here that Surtur is heading over there to join that fight. That is my assumption, so I start moving in that direction as well to help. Turns out I was wrong. You see him in left lane right here, and I see this as well, but I see Keranos fighting for his life under mid tower. So I go in. I should not have, right? Keranos was safe. He was fine. I attacked this, despite the fact that I have no magic protections and there's 2 magics here. This would not have been as much of a problem if they had a physical jungler, okay? This was not a poor decision because the 2 of them were attacking the damage camp. It was a risky decision, but it wasn't necessarily a bad decision on that basis. It was a bad decision because the enemy jungler is a magic damage dealer, and I didn't have magic protections. That's why that was a poor decision. Again, if they had a standard assassin as a jungler, I would have been much better off. We probably would have at least taken one of them with us. It would have been much better. But because it's Ao Kuang, I died. And I should not have gone in there out of respect for Ao Kuang and his magic damage, right? That was a bad mistake for that reason. And again, I went in there because of that overconfidence. That is very specifically why I went in there. I was really far ahead. I'm doing really well, so I thought I could handle it. Again, despite the fact that I did not have any magic protections. Now, I assume correctly that he took my mana buff, which is the correct move to do here. So I go really quickly to check his. Of course, he has already taken that as well, but I'm not too concerned at this particular point because you can see where I have 33 MP5, and that's due to the Contagion, so I'm not that concerned. It's a mild setback, sure, but it's not as bad as it would have been if I had, say, grabbed Gladiator's Shield. That would have been much more severe there. And of course, he's going to be looking for a fight because I have no idea why he fought me here. There really wasn't any particular reason to. You can see Zhong Kui right back there. I believe there's... I saw Ao Kuang right there, so I jump out, right? I'm not sure why Merlin is trying to surrender here. It's way too early to call this. Now, I didn't see that Ao Kuang in the jungle at the time because I didn't make any kind of call there, so I only saw that Ao Kuang in the... right here in this playback. Neith ults me for... probably because she figures that Surtur can kill me if she ults me. At this particular point, I'm just stalling for time because I want to get my teleport back. Ao Kuang goofs his ult on me, and while he does kill me, I take him with me, which is really big, actually. That was a mistake of Ao Kuang's, because Ao Kuang at this particular point was worth more than I was. I've been doing pretty well, sure, but he was a higher level, and he had a much higher score, right? He had more kills, and fewer deaths, he had more assists. That was a really good trade for me. Yes, I died, yes, Surtur gets to get some of his own back, right? But I got a lot more out of that than Ao Kuang did. Yes, again, Surtur did get benefit, but I didn't lose as much as you would think, because Ao Kuang died there, right? And then I want to fight him here. Now, I want to fight him for 2 reasons. One, he's lost half his mana, so that's really good. Second, I'm a level above him still, so I know that if I can apply the pressure consistently enough that I can actually take him out. And he sticks to the fight way too long here. I can understand him wanting to fight to try to clear the minions, but he doesn't really focus on them hard enough, right? And then, of course, I stun him. I hit him with my Raven Shield. He's trying to pick up his rocks for healing. And then, for some reason, he stuck around. Again, he stayed way too long. He had numerous opportunities in that fight to get out of that fight, run under his tower. It was right there. I would not have been able to catch up to him if he'd done so, but he just never did. So I take his tower, and what this is basically going to do is free me up fairly nicely, which is great because now when people start dying, I can use my movement speed boost from my passive to get to places a little faster. And Surtur isn't going to be able to match that kind of speed baseline. He has to hit somebody with his fire ring in order to get a movement speed boost, and if I'm not there to give that, then he's not going to be able to gain that benefit, right? So I'm sort of fine leaving my lane at this point, even if he takes my tower, which is almost certain given how low its HP is. But this does give me an opportunity to go help other lanes, specifically Merlin's, just to kind of keep Zhong Kui down. Merlin's a little bit behind. They try to attack Lancelot, but this is a great opportunity for me to ult the two of them. And I get some good damage here. We've got Freya coming in, because she's technically against support, even though she's got the purple buff. Right, and we're trying to wipe out Mulan, which we succeed at. And then I start tanking the tower, because I, of course, hit Zhong Kui. Notice that Ao Kuang back there is attacking Freya. Right, and now at this particular point, what I really want to do is take mid-tower to, again, help out Merlin. He's a little bit behind Zhong Kui here. I know that Surtur's coming in. I was not expecting the ult, but that works out. He goes for Freya, which is a little odd because he doesn't have any anti-healing as far as I know, so that makes quite a questionable decision. So she blasts him into next week because he also does not have much in the way of magic protections, right? I don't know why he prioritized Freya. Maybe he was assuming that he could outdamage her with his higher HP, or maybe he assumed he wouldn't be able to kill me because of my physical protections. I'm not really sure. Now, I make a mistake here. I arrogantly back, right? And then I get absolutely blasted by Zhong Kui and Neith here. I deserved that. That was a really arrogant back. I had no business backing there. That was an incredibly dumb decision. Okay? So at this particular point, though, I'm still ahead of Surtur. I'm borderline 15, and I have my teleport up, so I'm going to be able to access this. Right, actually, I want to go back really quick and talk about what they're building here, because this is important. This does shape my builds for the rest of it. Now, I see right here, Surtur is, again, not having that magic protection, as I referenced this earlier. Right, Ao Kuang is going for the attack speed, so mentally I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe I want Midgardian. I don't build it, but you'll see me almost start working on Midgardian Mail several times and then decide against it. I'll talk about why I decide against it later on. We, of course, have Zhong Kui and Ao Kuang, who are doing absolutely incredible. In fact, the enemy team is being hard carried by these two alone. And that is what I'm looking at here. So Ao Kuang, Zhong Kui, big threats on the field here, right? So I'm going to want to start building up those magic protections, obviously. I'm getting the cloak right now because usually you build the cloak or your dual protections, whatever they happen to be at this particular time, right? And then I'm just, spectating this, and then I'm looking to get into this fight. I go to my ward over here because even though it's way on the left, at the very least it's farther up, right? I throw down my sentry really quick, and off I go to join the fight, which isn't really a huge concern because they've already won it, right? They want to go for the Gold Fury, just bird bomb and throw a Gungnir while passing through. They don't even need me for this because, again, we technically have a 2-hunter comp here because the Freya is building damage, so they don't even need me there, alright? Now, we abuse the 2-hunter build later on in this match, specifically with the first rune of Gungnir. This is where you're going to really see this be abnormally effective, alright? Merlin's going to come over and help me with the Pyromancer. Should be fine. We've got Lancelot right there. I have my ult if we really need it, so I'm not particularly concerned about the possibility of this being stolen. You see Ao Kuang right there, and we grab that no problem. Now, we're just going to go back, and then Ao Kuang attacks, which is really interesting. This was not exactly a great decision on Ao Kwang's part, because the interesting thing with junglers, I mean, Surtur showed up here, but he can teleport. But the interesting thing about junglers is most of the time they're going to be moving at considerably faster speeds than the rest of their team. Again, the only reason Surtur was able to show up here in a decent amount of time is because he probably teleported to a ward, right? I'm just trying to save Kernanos at this point. I am aware of the fact that probably the rest of the enemy team is coming in. In fact, here's Zhong Kui, right? There goes Kernanos. But then we get Surtur. And then I'm just trying to keep Zhong Kui off of Merlin. And surprise, here's Mulan. Again, as a reminder, Mulan is their support. She's trying to get Merlin, but Merlin is able to successfully disengage because I had interrupted that hook shot. I get slapped absolutely to pieces, but Lancelot picks up the Zhong Kui, so that's fine. Zhong Kui, again, keep in mind, Zhong Kui is one of the two doing really intense amounts of damage. He's one of the ones carrying the enemy team, so him dying for me is a great trade. Yeah, I'm doing well, but I'm not doing Zhong Kui well here, right? So that's a really good trade for our team. I eventually think about, you know, what different item do I want to be building here. I already know that I want Pestilence as my final item. Again, the entirety of the enemy team is working with self-heal, and I want to build Pestilence as my last item because I want to sell Contagion. Contagion was never intended to be my full anti-healing item. Alright, I intend to swap that out for Midgardian Mail. I eventually decide on Erosion because two of them have Shell, and I decide Erosion is going to do me a little bit more good, especially since one of them has Phantom Shell, which is always going to be popped when I ult, so I can always draw out that shell with Erosion, but I'll talk about that later. But I start working on Runic Hammer, and I'll talk about that. I referenced why that's really great on Odin in the build guide. We'll talk about that a little bit more when I get it, but right now I'm just trying to figure out what to do, and I see Lancelot way up here and left, and I'm really worried about him. Yeah, he's doing pretty well. He is level 18, and yes, Surtur is 3 levels down, but I'm worried about who else is going to come over, right? I'm paying attention here. I notice Ao Kwang is dead, and Zhong Kui is in mid, so I'm fairly comfortable helping Lancelot here, okay? Now, again, you'll notice, Surtur sticks around. He toyed with the idea of attacking Lancelot, and he dies for this, right? I slow him down. Mulan doesn't block the Gungnir, so I kill Surtur, and then I want to get out of here. Now, I want to get out of here because the Mulan is still attacking me, which means somebody's on their way, and I assume it's Ao Kwang. Alright, again, at this point, I know Mulan is support, and the only reason a support is supposed to go after somebody by themselves is if reinforcements are on their way, right? At this point, I'm trying to rotate over and get Zhong Kui. But the guy makes tracks. I don't even know where the hell he disappears off to. Alright, I think he goes into mid lane. Yeah, there he goes. Right, I adjust. And then Ao Kwang spooks me. And then I'm just trying not to die to Ao Kwang. He goofs his ult. You could hear him use his ult and whiff that horrifically. And he's not going to chase me under tower with the shield, because unlike Surtur earlier, he respects the shield. Right? And he's trying to just do what he can to me. When Kernanos shows up and he's able to take care of the wave, I'm more interested in backing at this point. But Freya, of course, is now engaging the enemy in right lane. I thought about going over there, but then I realized I was just going to die if I went over there, so there's really no point to me doing so. I tried to teleport to the vision on the Gold Fury, but of course it's not a real ward. So, derpy moment there. But off we go. I'm going to try to participate in this fight as quickly as I can. I mean, it's a fairly even fight, even if Neith is about to come up pretty soon, which does give us a mild disadvantage, so we don't have much time. But here's Ao Kwang going in really early, and there's Phantom Shell, which is when I realize, alright, so maybe Erosion, right? We take out Ao Kwang. I somehow survive because somebody forgot to kill me. I think it was Zhong Kui. And I'm just, you know, looking to help out my team here. They kill Mulan. Now, I'm comfortable going in with this little health because I have my health chalice ticking and I've got a health shield, right? Neith ults me, which is fine. I can handle it. Just looking to pick up the Zhong Kui here. And there he is. I get the stun. Lancelot lands the killing blow. It's fantastic. Neith is kicking around somewhere, but it's not that concerning. What I intend on doing is helping with the Gold Fury. I called to attack the Gold Fury. Merlin picks that up. Freya's right behind me. And you can actually see where I make the decision, right? You can actually see this. Kill Zhong Kui. I see Freya right here, and originally I was going to go over here and clear out this jungle, but then I see Freya right here, and I'm like, we've got the opportunity to Gold Fury. Because I know she's not building defense at this point. I've seen her damage output. Alright, so I know we're playing with a 2 Hunter comp. So I'm just... I use the rune, you can see her attack speed getting absolutely blasted there. And just absolutely fantastic. Clear that really quick. Get the hell out of dodge. This time I don't back arrogantly. I increase her attack speed a little bit there, and then I'm just out of there. Right? I'm not looking to stick around and get picked off again. You only make that mistake once a match. Finish up my rune-forged hammer, decide which one I want. I almost went with rune breaking, but at the end of the day, I decided on flame forged because I wanted to start building up some of those runes. I haven't been getting them because, unfortunately, my ring of spears has been going down just before people die. I know that's a me problem, but I don't have as many runes as I'd like. So I wind up grabbing the damage one, right? So they're fighting in left for some reason, and I moved to try to do so, to try to meet up with them. By the way, fun fact, this will be important later. Almost nobody puts their wards on the left side of the fire giant. Pro tip, put your wards on the left side of the fire giant. It is far less often used, right? So why am I going up left lane right here? I'm going up left lane here because I have the benefit of Lancelot, and the enemy team is all in right lane trying to kill Cernunnos and Freya. So they're all pretty much distracted. Now, it turns out I was mostly wrong. I was mostly right, excuse me. I was only slightly wrong. Here's Neith paying attention. And then I make a really stupid decision. I see Zhong Kui here, and I decide, hey, I'm going to go attack Zhong Kui. Now, the important thing to note is... Ao Kuang is attacking Merlin in the background, right? I registered that, but for some reason it didn't bother me. Ao Kuang's about to kill me right here. Because I made a really stupid decision. Yeah, that's why I said oops there. I should never have gone for Zhong Kui. Once Lancelot and I took that tower, we should have just bailed. Lancelot followed me because he thought I knew what I was doing. So did I. I was wrong. Alright, that was an incredibly poor decision on my part. And again, that is being, having done really well so far in this match, and being overconfident, being really arrogant. Again, it happens quite a lot for solo players. Now, notice that they're starting the fire giant. They have no idea that ward is there because they've only put a sentry ward down on the right side, so they didn't see that ward there. Because people don't stick to one side when they attack the fire giant, I can see them. Well, for that matter, the whole team can. My whole team can. Now, what I do is I teleport in, grab another sentry ward to put it down, ult the fire giant after stealing it with my Raven Blast. Alright? Because, again... nobody wards the left side of the fire giant. Nobody. I discovered this by accident a couple of days ago. Nobody ever wards that. Use the homing spear to finish off Neith, obviously. Come over here to either avenge or save Cernunnos. I thought for sure he was going to die there. And what I want to do here is body block. It works. Barely. But I do save him. So that's great. Right, so we have the fire giant, we wiped them all out, and 3 of us still survived long enough to still have the fire giant buff. Now I'm going to run over here and grab the Stygian beacon here. Right? Go ahead and grab this. Lancelot's pushing that up. They all just respawn. There's 0 risk of us losing this at this point, right? Boom, there it is. Right? Now I'm trying to figure out what specifically I want to do next. Right? I wind up going for these because the Gold Fury is coming up pretty soon. I want to at least have vision on the Gold Fury for this. So I clear this. I'm also trying to keep an eye on Lancelot over there because I am a little concerned he'll get attacked. You can actually see Ao Kuang speeding into the jungle really quick. I also see that I have enough, I actually falsely believe I have enough for Pestilence. Obviously, I'm 300 short. Because I keep forgetting to increase the price of that. I don't know how I keep forgetting that, but anyways. So, they're all looking at Gold Fury. Now, I'm really concerned because the enemy team is kicking around, but there's Ao Kuang in mid. So Ao Kuang being in mid meant that they didn't know that we were there at the Gold Fury. If he'd still been, missing or somewhere in the jungle, I would have been more concerned. But, we're all grouping up for right lane, and we're prepping to attack right lane at this particular point in time. Freya discovers the enemy team. This isn't a great opening to a fight, I'll give you that. We fight anyways because I'm not really sure why we fought anyways. I think the assumption here was kind of we would have to be forced to do a fight because the Titans were about to meet anyways. Right? So I'm trying to scare off Ao Kuang. I catch Neith's backflip, which is huge. Slow her down. Right? Use my shield to absorb some damage here. Prevent Mulan from escaping, which is absolutely fantastic. There goes Ao Kuang, right? Merlin took him out. I'm trying to keep Mulan from getting back. Lancelot takes care of that for me. I tank this for them to get out. Keranos gets the wrong idea here. He thinks I'm trying to give him time to solo that. We don't have the health for that. Neither Lancelot nor I. Lancelot could tank it for a little bit, but that isn't going to happen. Besides, we have the Titans back here, which make for a much better tank than I ever will be. So if we take this out, which we do, nice and quick, right, we should be able to get there in time to maybe do something. It is a bit of a risk that we attack right here because the enemy team is coming up. You have Zhonghui just respawning, Surtur is fresh, and Neith is coming up pretty soon. So this was a bit of a risk here. Really, what I'm hoping for is just to take the Phoenix and get out of dodge. Zhonghui ults way too early there. You can see how early he ulted. That was just far too early. Go ahead and slap Surtur. You can see that burn damage going off. We have the Pyromancer getting taken by Freya, which is actually a really good idea because she wasn't going to be able to get here in time to help us out with any of this anyways. Now, now we took the Phoenix. We really should have bailed out. You can see me falling back because I didn't want to get ulted by Ao Kuang. We really should be leaving here because we aren't winning this fight. Alright, yes, Freya is coming in, and she's coming in fresh, but the rest of us are near death, right? Theoretically speaking, I'm near death. Lancelot is, you can see, dying. And this is where Mulan picks me off. Great gameplay by her. Ao Kuang ults. And at that point, they start looking to try to bail, right? Now, I'm readjusting my build here. I'm grabbing Erosion because they do have Phantom Shell. I know this. I also know that every time I ult, they're going to pop Phantom Shell, so I can guaranteed reduce their shell. Right? They almost kill Mulan there. It's so close. And then they try to leave. And Ao Kuang, and this is really awesome because Ao Kuang used his escape to initiate, and Freya had her hastened ring effect up, so she just slaughters him. She tries to go back in for some bizarre reason. Not sure why. It's a 3v2 at this point. Yeah, they're really strong, don't get me wrong, Freya and Merlin, but I don't think they're going to win a 3v2 here, right? So they need to go, and they're trying to bait them out. This isn't a real backing attempt. That was a bait attempt, which works on Surtur, kind of. They do pick him up, but now, someone else has respawned, which is the whole problem of attacking the Phoenixes at this particular point. They don't have a ward up, so I can't go and help them. So I'm just going to teleport to mid lane. And then what I want to do is put another ward down on the Fire Giant, is my plan. Boom. Right? And then I'm actually expecting them to come after the Fire Giant, but then I realize, no, they can't really because there's only 2 of them alive. So I just go on ahead and start clearing the jungle for some gold. I'm a little behind on gold because I did sell Contagion for Erosion, so I'm a little behind on gold. I want to get to my Bluestone Brooch so I can do a little bit more damage to the enemy. Is really what I'm looking for there. So just going ahead and clear this out. This is just jungle clearing, and I just want to jungle clear in this area to stay near the Fire Giant and be available. Lancelot gets attacked by Zhonghui. I'm just looking to make sure he gets out of there. He does. It's fine. I can see they put a regular ward down, which is fairly interesting. I think Keranos gets rid of that there. Yeah, he does. And again, I'm just looking for gold here at this point. And boom, we start this. Which was a really ballsy call by Merlin, by the way. Because Ao Kuang's right there. Right? Now what I do is I wait until we get somebody in here that I can trap in with the Fire Giant is kind of what I'm hoping for here. So I don't ult yet. Right, here's Mulan. And here is Ao Kuang. I trapped Mulan and Ao Kuang in there. We grab that, and they of course take a lot of the Fire Giant damage. You can see where Surtur and Mulan took a good bit of chunk of that damage from those pools of lava that the Fire Giant was using, which is why we slaughtered them so quickly here. Both of them, in other words, the entirety of the enemy front line took a lot of damage from the fire pools, right? I'm just chasing down the Zhong Kui because if we kill him, that's pretty much it, you know, for their team. So I'm just trying to chase him down. He kind of effectively dodges my jump. He does go towards, of course, my allies, which is what I wanted. Now if we can just kill Mulan. Very unfortunate mix-up there with the Freya's banishment there. Mulan does pull in the Merlin. I'm just trying to keep Merlin alive. Slap him with some damage. Boom. There it is. Great. Finished off Merlin, and now we're just looking to press down the Titan. You can see Keranos was attacking the Titan. Now, Keranos made the right choice here. As a hunter, Keranos is going to hit the Titan harder and faster than the rest of us. Lancelot slides into oblivion for some reason there. We don't question this. And, of course, Keranos also had a large number of minions to help him. So, basically, as long as we could keep the rest of the enemy team busy, he was going to be totally fine to take the entirety of the Titan, no problem by himself, right? So now I want to talk about builds here. So, yes, again, the Surtur did not do particularly well here, and that isn't actually due to the builds, although you can see where Surtur sold Soul Eater, which, quite frankly, is a mistake. Once you have an item, once you have a stacking item fully stacked, you really shouldn't sell it. You put all that effort in to build that up, so selling it is just not gonna fly really that well, okay? Not really a great decision. So that was a poor decision, but that was a desperation move from how quickly Surtur was dying, but that actually has nothing to do with the Surtur. See, again, I referenced this a couple of times throughout this match, several times throughout this match actually, but we had a dual ADC team comp. You can see Keranos was really heavy on the penetration here. He had Executioner and Dominance and Chin Size, which isn't penetration, obviously, but it's percentage of health, so it targets tanks. And again, this is a really great build, considering Mulan is high protection, she was their support. Zhong Kui with his passive gets anywhere from 1 to 40 bonus protections of both physical and magical, so he's a little tankier than the average mage, as I mentioned earlier. Ao Kuang built Berserker's Shield, again, probably out of desperation, although, frankly, there's a better item he could have built if he really wanted to deal with that, but I'll talk about that in a second. And, of course, punch right through Surtur, who, of course, is building defensively. So we had the Keranos building very anti-tank, which is absolutely the correct choice. Freya built Demonic Grip, again, very anti-tank, absolutely the correct choice. Really fantastic move. You have Merlin with Charon's Coin and Soul Reaver, and on top of that, he had Ethereal Staff. 3 fantastic anti-tank items. I didn't actually, you can see where I didn't even get to Bluestone Brooch, which also does percentage of health. It's percentage of current health, but with 3 tanks, that percentage of current health is going to be higher, especially since Zhong Kui had E-Staff, so that was going to really help out my damage, actually, in the long run. But, you know, even with that factored, I was intending on going into that, right? And you can see where Lancelot grabbed Serrated Edge for 30% penetration, combined, of course, with the Crusher. Now, the problem here is more about the lack of specific items on the enemy team. The enemy team sort of panic adjusted for the dual hunter combination, but they focused too hard on the physical, okay? The physical side of this. Again, we had 2 damaging mages, Freya and Merlin. There was no real support. There was no high defense magic damage. It was two really high damage magic people. And you can really see the enemy team shirk their magic protections just absolutely wholesale here across the board. Let's talk about it. Now, Zonqui's build is fairly standard, alright? Not really a huge deal, although it is really interesting where he went heavy on the anti-tank. Look at his build. Charon's Coin, 20% penetration. Obsidian Shard, 20%. I'm sorry, it's 10 or 20%. They keep adjusting it. I believe it's 20% currently, with an additional 10% on your first ability used in a 10 or 15 second time period. E-Staff reduces enemies' maximum health by 8%, I think. 6 or 8%. And gives it to you. The other percent goes for mana. And Soul Reaver, which does percentage of health. Now, this is a really powerful anti-tank build, and the Zonqui played really well, but the Zonqui would have played better if he'd gone for more flat penetration, if he'd gone for a little bit more in terms of high power, because the downside of Charon's Coin, the downside of Chronos Pendant, the downside of Obsidian Shard, even the downside of Soul Reaver is that none of these have really high power. There are a lot of items that get really high levels of power. Soul Reaver is one of them. Rod of Tahuti is another really fantastic option. Zonqui went really heavy on the health focus, the percentage of health focus, and really heavy on the penetration. And again, yes, it worked out really well for him, but you also have to remember that Zonqui had a really great early game as well, due to Ao Kuang also doing really well, and Ao Kuang having that really fantastic execute. The Zonqui would have done a little bit better, in my opinion, if he'd grabbed Spear of Desolation instead of Charon's Coin. Higher power, flat penetration, 10% cooldowns, probably wouldn't have even needed Chronos Pendant, could have built more power on that, could have built Spear of the Magus, increased the damage taken by victims by 7.5%, would have really helped out Zonqui, would have helped Zonqui hit harder. We only had one person building protections, namely me, so everyone else would have been absolutely devastated by this, especially in conjunction with his ult, so Spear of the Magus would have been a great option there. He would have done really well with lifesteal, because with only one person building defense, the other four he was again going to do really high damage to, and so he would have healed more off of them. So lifesteal would have been a really incredible choice for him. Instead of E-Staff, could have gone for Bancrofts with a nice Typhon's Fang, get some of that penetration back. Again, he wouldn't have needed too much penetration, frankly, for penetration. He could have just run Spear of the Magus, Typhon's Fang, and possibly Rod of Tahuti. He would have hit even harder than what he was hitting here. He traded some power for pen he didn't need, really. Okay? Is basically the problem here. That's the bulk of the problem here. He traded power for more penetration, essentially. Mulan, pretty fine build overall. The only thing that she could have built that would have been a really great improvement would have been dropping the Stone of Binding here in favor of, well, no, not necessarily Stone of Binding. I will give you that. The Stone of Binding is okay on Mulan. She does have the slow. She does have the pull. She has the root with her ult. Fair enough. Fair enough. I actually would have, the improvement to her build here would have been Pestilence instead of Contagion. Not necessarily at this point. Obviously, you want physical protections here. But build Gladiator's Shield as the third. Stone of Binding as the fourth. That's fine. The Glove is fine. Gauntlet of Thebes is fine. So this is all fine. Don't build Contagion. Build instead Glad Shield here as the third. This is fine. Instead of Glad Shield, Pestilence, and then as a final item, grab either Midgardian Mail to help with that auto-attack damage coming in from Freya and from Cernunnos, or alternatively, grab the Bewitched Ritual Dagger, which also reduces attack speed of enemies in an area around you, which would have been really good. It would have also really helped her. Would have also given her some cooldowns as well. And furthermore, the Bewitched or the Witching Ritual Dagger, I'm not sure what it's officially called, but the Bewitched Ritual Dagger would have also reduced the cooldown of her Phantom Shell to be more in line with my ult's cooldown, because at base, considering that I had enough cooldowns to run this way, she was only able to Phantom Shell every other Ring of Spears. So only half of my ults were going to be phantomed out of. Alright. If she'd built the Bewitched Ritual Dagger, not only would she have been reducing the attack speed of Freya and Kernanos, something her team desperately needed, but she also would have been able to Phantom Shell her team out of my ults fully 2/3 of the time. Alright? Approximately. Rather than half. Which makes a difference. It doesn't sound like a big difference, but it really is. Anybody who has played Zhong Kui or even Mulan against a late game Odin will know exactly what I'm talking about there, okay? But that would have been a bit of a better build. Again, just swap out Contagion for Pestilence and grab the Bewitched Ritual Dagger as a final item. Go for Pestilence right here, Glad Shield at third. That would have been a little bit better for her team. Neith I don't have any particular problem with, although she built Chin's size a little too early, and she built this wicked late. This would have been better. Okay, look. If you want lifesteal in the back half of the game, there's nothing wrong with that. But don't build Devourer's Gauntlet after your third item. It's going to take too long to stack by that point because you're team fighting more often. And that's something people really forget. They think, oh, because I'm a hunter, I can wipe out minions really quick and stack this really fast. Frankly, no. In the second half of the game, you are team fighting so much more often that you are scrimping and scrounging for stacks if you're trying to build them. The only exception to this is Soul Eater, because you get stacks anytime you see something die, regardless of who killed it or what side it's on. Doesn't matter. If it died in your vision range, boom, that's a stack. So with the sole exception of Soul Eater, pun intended, stacking items in the back half of the game is not likely to stack in time for it to matter. This should have been Aussie. Aussie would have given her the lifesteal, well, not exactly the lifesteal she was looking for, but it would have given her some attack speed, a respectable amount of power, would have given her a really great amount of lifesteal, especially if she was in danger. This should have been Aussie, but other than that, and other than a mild complaint that she built Chin size a bit too early, I think she probably should have built Jotuns as her third item, get those cooldowns, get her to use her ult more often, get her self-healing ability up more often. I think Jotun's Wrath should have been her third item. So swap these two. Devourer's Gauntlet should have been Aussie. Ao Kuang, again, I don't really have an issue with Ao Kuang's build, but instead of Berserker's Shield, he probably should have either gone Midgardians or, even better, Toxic Blade, which reduces the attack speed of people you auto-attack and reduces their healing. Would have really helped with Freya. Hands down. Would have really helped with Kernanos because of all of his lifesteal. And if he was in the Spring form, which our Kernanos was a lot of the time, if you paid attention throughout the match, he spent a lot of time in Spring form for extra lifesteal. Toxic Blade would have been absolutely fantastic. Also would have increased his attack speed. Wouldn't have given him physical protections, but it would have given him some max health, which would have been fine. And that would have really been the move. Also, what I can't figure out is why he built Typhon's Fang instead of... Well, I know on paper why he built this. He built this because his passive gives him lifesteal. He had Polynomicon, but instead of Polynomicon, he frankly probably should have gone with Bancrofts, the quickened Bancrofts, the hastened Bancrofts. I can't remember if it's hastened or quickened. But that would have given him much higher attack speed, would have given him more power. Yes, he wouldn't have had the damage spike every other time he used an ability, but his damage would have been more consistent in the long term. He would have been able to, again, have that attack speed. He would have been able to take better advantage of Telkines, right? With the higher attack speed means more Telkines procs. There we go. I kept trying to say prompts for some reason. But it would have been more Telkines procs, which would have been great, considering our team, again, was really squishy. So these Telkines procs were doing work. Okay? Furthermore, he would have had an even smoother early game if he didn't build stacks. Now, he probably built this because he was ahead and could get away with it. Let's be really honest. That's probably why this was built. Also combos really well with Polynomicon and Typhon's Fang, but it combos equally as well with Bancrofts, for Pete's sakes. So there was really no reason he needed Poly over Bancrofts. Bancrofts, again, would have worked better with Telkines. I don't actually have an issue with Polynomicon on Ao Kuang. It's very effective on Ao Kuang. Alright, this was not built out of whim or whimsy. This is effective on Ao Kuang, but in combination with his Typhon's Fang and also his Telkines Ring, I think Quicken Bancroft's Talon would have been a better choice for his fourth item, personally. Finally, the Surtur, which is the really big mountain we have to scale here. Surtur, first off, Surtur's main gameplay problem. We're going to leave aside the build for a second. Surtur's primary issue with the gameplay is overstaying. I did it a couple of times in the match, so I'm just as guilty of this, but the Surtur very consistently did this. I had moments of overconfidence. Surtur was very aggressive for the bulk of the match. Stayed way too long in a lot of fights. Build-wise, we have completely separate issues. Now, I don't actually have an issue with Surtur building Soul Eater item 2. I did very specifically grab a temporary contagion to counteract that, which was very effective. Okay? But the Soul Eater was fine. The first problem we have is Spectral Armor here, actually, is the first problem. This is a problem because we didn't have crits. Alright, I don't know if Surtur assumed we had crits. Now, it is worth noting, Cernunnos does have Deathbringer, which is fair. But Deathbringer has a baseline crit chance of like 30%. And Cernunnos did not build Poisoned Deathbringer for the crit damage. Cernunnos built Poisoned Deathbringer for the slow. It was never about the crit damage for this. The crit damage on Poisoned Deathbringer, when it's the only crit item you have, that crit damage is a happy bonus. You're actually building this for the slowing effect, which combos really nicely with Cernunnos' winter form. Alright, well, I say winter form. His winter throws. Alright, so that's very likely why Cernunnos bought Poisoned Deathbringers, specifically. But we only had one crit item on the entirety of the team, so Spectral Armor was an extreme overreaction to that. Just straight up. This should have been, quite frankly, this should have been Gladiator's Shield. Build Midgardian Mail as your fourth. Grab... No, actually, owning a Hunter's Garb wasn't bad. That was fine. This right here was probably going to be Amulet of the Stronghold. Let's be really honest. I think that Surtur just didn't have the gold to get there. Considering that Surtur sold Soul Eater for really specifically Stone of Binding. Now, Stone of Binding is fine on Surtur. He's got a slow, he's got the stun. It's totally fine on Surtur. This isn't by itself a problem. It's just that he sold Soul Eater for it. Alright, that's the crux of the issue. And, of course, getting Corrupted Bluestone here would have been a really great option for Surtur as well. Surtur's got some actually decent auto attacks. They have small AoE effect. Absolutely fantastic. Actually, I believe it's officially called a cleave effect, but anyways. So Surtur could do, you know, some pretty sweet things with that, so that's fine. It just comes down to the really real problem of, look, you stayed too long in most fights, and you sold Soul Eater for no reason, and I would say the only real third criticism would be Spectral Armor was a gross overreaction to the single crit item on our team. Alright, very extreme reaction. Now this is really interesting, because I've seen some complaints, as a final note before I end this match, I've seen some complaints on the SMITE forums that MMR is a little bit wonky right now, which is probably partially related to the Spirit Surges, partially related to, I think it's mostly related to the Stygian Beacon, where after the third beacon and you push down the Titan, there's sometimes where that can be enough to push down the enemy Titan and win. I've had that happen quite a number of times. So I think MMR is having a little bit of a hard time differentiating between people. My MMR is fucked up right now because of my connection issues the past 2 days and my attempts at getting sufficient gameplay and failing at that. These matches tended to be losses because for a couple of minutes at a time, there was one match where I dropped out 3 separate times. All right, and it takes me, I want to say, 2 or 3 minutes, depending on how things feel, I guess. But it takes me, a couple of minutes to get back into the match. So 2, 4, 6, anywhere from like 6 to 9 minutes in a match, 2 to 4 minutes for the past couple of days. I've been having a really rough time. So my MMR is a little bit wonkier than average right now because, of course, those were losses. When you disconnect, you tend to run into towers and stuff. Pretty unfortunate. So my MMR is a little bit off, and you can see a really strong discrepancy on the enemy team as well between Zhong Kui and Ao Kuang and the rest of their team. They very clearly hard carried that, and I think this is a bit of an MMR issue. It's just worth noting here because Surtur, I don't know if Surtur is ever going to watch this, and I don't mean this in a mean way. It seems like Surtur is a newer player than the bulk of the other players in this match. I do very distinctly get that impression. Neith as well, although I say that with less confidence because I wasn't in her lane. So just from what I saw though, she also seemed to be a bit of a newer player here. By newer, I don't mean like started playing 3 months ago. I mean either has come back after a long absence or just doesn't have the amount of experience that everyone else in this match had. There is visually a difference in familiarity with the game here, which is why I haven't been particularly harsh with Surtur here. Now, we have to at least acknowledge the mistakes, okay? Because if you don't acknowledge the mistakes, you can't learn from them, and the whole point of me doing SMITE videos is to teach you. And Surtur is a great example, a bit of an extreme example to be sure, but a great example of overconfidence as a solo laner. And I warn solo laners about this all the time. I experience it. I see it all the time. This is just a very, very visual version of this, all right, throughout this match. And again, I'm not going to go too hard on the Surtur. I think this is an MMR issue. Primarily, and I'm partially responsible for that because of my internet the past couple of days, so, and my stubbornness and my unwillingness to give up, which is a bit of a character flaw there. But first off, if Surtur ever watches this match, there were mistakes, and that's the bulk of them, right? Those big 3, staying too long in fights, selling Soul Eater at full stacks, and an excessive reaction to the single crit item. For everyone else, again, it's very important not to mock the Surtur or the Neith, because first off, we've all been there. Some of you may still be at that level of experience. It might be why you're watching this. Second, it is a great visual example. Watch it and learn from it. But with that being said, I am going to leave this here. I just wanted to talk about that because for the past week or so, I've been seeing some people talk about MMR being a little bit out of whack. And this is a great example of that. And that's not necessarily... one final moment, maybe we'll get this to an even hour. I'm not blaming Hi-Rez for this, alright? They are constantly looking to evolve the game to keep it fresh, which is important for a game like SMITE. It's important for MOBAs to be fresh. It's why it's survived 10 years, technically 11. That's why it's lasted so long, is they're trying new things, they're experimenting, they care about the game. Okay? They do. And I think that they weren't quite prepared. I mentioned this when I was talking about the patch notes, but I think they made too many changes at one time, and they're having a hard time adjusting. All right, and I think this is one of the results of that. I think that this MMR issue will be resolved when they figure out how the Stygian Beacon is affecting people's MMRs, and I think they'll adjust that, but I don't think we're going to see that kind of adjustment this year. I think that's going to be a next year adjustment. I think we're going to see that either at the end of this year or early on in the next year. So I'm not blaming high-res. Mistakes happen. And I think they just did too much at one time. This should have been a bit more of a gradual change here. They shouldn't have included both Spirit Surges and the Stygian Beacon. I think that was one too many things introduced at one time that should have been spaced out a little bit better when they had a better idea of how each of these individually would affect the MMR, would affect the gameplay, would affect the match flow. Personally, Spirit Surge is okay. I don't have any particularly strong feelings about it either way. You'll notice I don't really talk about it extensively. There are occasional moments it comes up and are really strategically important, but not very often. But the Stygian Beacon is pretty damn important, especially given that, again, you can push a Titan down to their Titan and win that way. That is a possible win condition there. Okay, so I like the Stygian Beacon. I think it adds a lot of interest to the mid lane and to the match. It makes the jungler very important. I would argue it increases the pressure on junglers to be good, which does concern me. I'll talk about that more in the jungler episode when I talk about jungling with the new Conquest map. I haven't gotten around to that because obviously I've been, of course, having internet connections. I've been trying to get a Fafnir game, which I should be able to get the Fafnir game pretty soon, by the way, now that people have stopped taking Charon into the support role. But I should be able to get a Fafnir game soon. I have that. I want to tackle Lancelot, refresh that, because I have a request for that. But this is Odin jungle, Odin solo in year 10 with the Spirit Surge, with the Titan. Absolutely fantastic. With that being said, thank you all very much for joining me. If you liked this, please like and subscribe. If you didn't, please ignore me. And if you have any comments, questions, concerns, ideas, suggestions, or requests, please leave them down in the comment section below. And thank you all very much for joining me, and have a great 24 hours.